So our next speaker is the director of the Kinghorn Cancer Centre at the Garvan Institute. And a friend of mine had treatment at the Kinghorn this year and she called it the Kinghorn Day Spa. It was such a welcoming place for patients. So after moving to New South Wales, he established the Australian Genomic Cancer Medicine Centre, a precision medicine program for patients with rare and early onset cancers. And Professor David Thomas will be speaking about pillars 2 and 3 of the report. Please welcome Professor David Thomas.
Thanks, Sophie. It's a great pleasure to be here as part of this wonderful launch, setting out a vision for what Australia could achieve if we put our minds to it. So, as Sophie said, I'm focused upon genomics and clinical trials and research and how to synthesize the combination of those things for one very important reason. I actually don't think genomics is critical to what is important to patients and to doctors. What is important to patients and doctors is how we use that information to change the outcomes for the patients that are in front of us today. So what I want to talk to you about is not about principles, because I think they've been well established, and I'll go over some of that evidence in the next few slides. But I want to talk about not the what, but the how we achieve that, and to lay down a challenge and a blueprint for how we'll do that over the next few years. A sustainable, research-led, evidence-based and patient-centered model for universal access to testing and treatment. So this is a bit of a personal journey for me. It started about 10 years ago when it became clear that cancer as a genetic disease was about to be transformed by this wonderful breakthrough, explosion in technology that Richard referred to earlier in genomics. So we set up a program which was then providing cancer patients just with the testing for 1,000 of them across Victoria. When I came up to New South Wales, I realized that what we needed to do was to connect that testing to treatments. So we developed what we call a master trials platform, which formed the basis of the Australian Genomic Cancer Medicine Centre. That program was so successful that we expanded it through federal government support, the support of Minister Hunt, to create a company which united all the cancer centres in our country and every state and territory so that patients wouldn't have to travel to New South Wales to take part in the program, so that we could expand our scope of ambition to get to 6,000 people over 5 years, and to bring that together with partnerships with key stakeholders such as industry and philanthropy to make a difference. So that's actually happened. That's not a theoretical exercise. We're now open through close to 12 centres in every state and territory, and you can see in the map to the left that we've begun enrolling patients onto the program. And our goal through these centres is that we'll have 6,000 patients screened, but much more important, 1,000 people who will receive matched therapy on clinical trials. The demand has been absolutely immense, unsurprising for any person in this audience. And what's been satisfying is that the most common cancers we've had referred onto our program have been ones with the most dreadful outcomes, like brain cancer and pancreatic cancer, where research like this is absolutely essential to transforming the future for patients. It's been immensely successful in engaging with the community. We've had more than 300 clinicians and from more than 100 institutions refer onto the program. And I'm pleased to announce that today we passed the 3,000 patient mark 3 years ahead of schedule. But the problem isn't the test. The problem is how we get access to the treatment, and more importantly, how we as a society can afford the success of science. Like any breakthrough technology, we go through this, what we call a Gartner hype cycle, where the initial excitement of a technology produces inflated expectations, then followed by equilibration as we understand that it can't produce everything that we want, and then slowly adaptation to take advantage of the potential to produce the true plateau of productivity. And the question is, where are we in this cycle? Well, I'm firmly of the view that we've passed the point of proof of principle. We're on the slope of enlightenment and en road to plateau of productivity. The reality is today, compared to when I was a young oncologist 25 years ago, that clinical trials have become an absolutely essential part of the options we offer patients. Down the bottom, you see an analysis of more than 300 phase 1 clinical trials, which used to have a chance of causing a tumour to shrink of about 5%. With precision medicine principles linking the drug to an appropriate target, that's now jumped to 30%. That's approximately twice the response rate I could expect for my patients with sarcoma with the first-line treatment with chemotherapy today. This is true not just for phase 1 trials, but for phase 2 trials. For all clinical trials, participation in research not only affords better care, but is beginning to transform the outcomes for the patients that take part. So clinical trials, in my view, are absolutely essential. Within the molecular screening and therapeutics program of Omico, I'm going to share with you just one extremely complex roadmap for patients with lung cancer, still the leading cause of cancer death in Australia today. This program, enabled again by industry partnerships and with federal government support, is providing 1,000 patients with lung cancer not only access to molecular testing, but to a whole range of clinical trials which are just progressively building over time, increasing the number of options for treatment of patients. And that's turning, as we're beginning to understand, and these are outcome data from an Australian-owned program, Omico, and MOST, that we can see the patients who receive a matched therapy in our own program are also benefiting, with an approximate doubling of the lifespan of the patients who receive matched therapy. To date, more than 300 patients on the program have received access to targeted therapy as a consequence of genomic screening. But that's not where it has to end. We know that there are far more patients who need this principle of treatment translated into practice. And this is an example of one patient of mine in 2017 with metastatic lung, soft tissue sarcoma with what we call cannonball metastases to the lungs, who through the program got access to an immunotherapy. And you can see over 3 months, this patient who had no other treatment options showed shrinkage. It's about the patient in the end when you can tell whether an idea really has value. Australians, like any resilient, tough nation, must be innovators, are innovators. We cannot be laggards. In any technology of this kind, it's the early adopters that realise most fully the benefits for our patients of technological breakthroughs like precision oncology. So what we'd like to lay out in phase 4 and phase 5 of my personal journey is to extend the principles that we've been able to prove about partnerships with industry, about the nationalisation of the program through the connection of cancer centres throughout the country, is to go the whole hog. Let's make sure that every Australian who's got advanced cancer, who has the remotest chance of benefiting from treatment, gets access to population-scale, national, multi-institutional genomic profiling based around a master trials platform, sure, through research, but actually through also expanding the clinical trials economy. And that, in turn, as proof of principle at scale, can then lead to a phase where it's woven, research and genomics is woven into the healthcare system that Minister Hunt and Shadow Minister Bowen see as the future for healthcare for all Australians. How's this going to happen? Well, you might be surprised to know that 90% of the drugs currently in development are targeted small molecules or biologics. They're exquisitely, brilliantly designed for a target that has to be found and can only be found in cancers through genomic profiling. So a recent analysis of the rate-limiting steps for drug development for patients is the ability through genomic screening to find the patients, those very small subpopulations who will have the maximum benefit from getting access to these drugs. This is not a completely unachievable goal. We can look at another tough, resilient people, the Finns, who throughout the 20th century have faced enormous challenges and have responded with extraordinary innovation, courage, and indeed it's been government and led by the people. They've developed partnerships with industry that have enabled them, for example, to develop the FinGen Research Project, which is designed to take Finland to the very forefront of medical research through genomics into aspects of cancer care. And this has come through a partnership between businesses, the healthcare industry, biobanks, universities, hospitals, government-supported health system, as well as pharmaceutical companies, but working together. It's these silos that we need to overcome. We need to utilize all the resources that we have available to realize the potential of the ideas that we've discussed. And so what Omico and a think tank of collaborating partners across industry, almost every sector of the community, is to think about pulling those silos together into a coordinated whole that develops a molecular profiling platform that is available for all Australians with advanced cancer, that is then linked through clinical trials to access to therapies where knowledge can be generated, patients will benefit, and the entire health system can work in the most productive way to generate the outcomes that we want. And why should we do this? Because if we do this, we not only improve health outcomes for 100,000 Australians, we put 12,000 Australians onto targeted therapies they would not otherwise be able to access. That will directly lead, by our estimates currently, to 4,000 years of life gained and faster, better routine diagnosis of cancers than is possible with the current system. It will stimulate the clever economy and create a sustainable model for health by directly creating 2,000 new long-term high-value jobs. Australia should be a leading centre globally for precision medicine, and this can place us in that position. It will grow Australian high-tech businesses, including in data analytics, as Enrico has described, from understanding and using this data to further accelerate breakthroughs in healthcare. And it should be invested not just from the public, but from the private sector, because we all have a stake in this. What this will in turn do is to transform medical research. It will expand massively clinical trials in this country, providing access to drugs through that mechanism, generating light as well as heat. And it will bridge, importantly, a challenge for all Western medical research enterprises between the ideas that are generated in our wonderful medical research facilities into things that are commercialized and lead to standards of healthcare. This has been a challenge for the past 10 to 20 years, that the universities have gone and generated enormous value out of basic research, but transitioning from that basic discovery, especially in Australia, into enterprises that can be, where the value can be developed. And the pharmaceutical sector is overwhelmingly still an industry-sponsored exercise, and pharmaceutical sector is where we get our drugs. So by creating this private-public ecosystem for research-led, evidence-based healthcare based on precision medicine, we turn the valley of death to the fertile valley that will grow not only health outcomes, through partnerships between all of the entities which are already part of our own program today and can only grow further. We turn that into something that will stimulate the economy and grow the wealth of our country so that health does not come at the expense of wealth. In a time of COVID, perhaps more than ever, the investments we've made in health can be turned into a way to take Australia even more forward to be a leader in healthcare. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David.